On behalf of the Centre Director, Professor Susan Danby, I'd like to welcome you all tonight, Australian time, and to the Digital Child's inaugural celebration of Children's Week in 2021. Susan actually is unfortunately ill this evening and sends her apologies, but this event will be the first of many of the Centre, and so she looks forward to catching up with you all in the meantime and also at future events. Children's Week is a celebration of children, and it's also a call for society to respond to the plight of children around the world who are denied the opportunities and necessities of a happy childhood. Children are growing, learning and connecting with digital technology that's rapidly changing and evolving every day. My nod to Children's Week is this beautiful AIME t-shirt that I'm wearing this evening with the artwork of a young artist, Lily Tranby, and Lily did this artwork a few years ago now, but she was only in grade 3. And I think it reflects beautifully the imagination and possibility of this country, Australia, that we are all meeting on this evening. And it brings me to pay my respects and to acknowledge the traditional lands and waters of all of the countries we meet on across the world, and the First Nations people, wherever you are and that we're meeting on this evening. I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and I guess particularly topical to us all, to our future elders, the children and the young people everywhere. And I guess in having this panel this evening, we're trying to answer a few questions. People are asking, how can technology help my children learn? How much technology is enough technology and good in digital engagement from bad? How do we determine that? How do we keep children safe online? And so through the innovative research of the Centre, we aim to support all children, and no matter their background, to grow up in a healthy, educated and connected digital and changing world. Our panel will explore how a post-pandemic world will affect the digital child and their right to make friends and connect safely with others. And COVID, as we all know, has accelerated digital education technology exponentially. It's heightened the role of technology in the lives of families and children. And it's also put the spotlight on the digital divide, digital and media literacy, and online privacy and safety. In Australia, our government is currently looking at a privacy legislation amendment, or the online privacy bill, and looking at the role of tech companies in data to be collected and used in the best way and the best interest of children, and also the increased responsibility of parents and carers in children's digital lives. So without delay, I'd like to introduce our panel. This evening we have Dr. Kate Highfield, the General Manager of Professional Learning and Research Translation at Early Childhood Australia. We have Megan O'Sullivan, the General Manager of Commercial at Scitec. We have Samantha Yorke, from Government Affairs and Public Policy from Google Australia. And our panellists will all speak, and I will then lead a discussion of question and answers. And as mentioned, when you were first joining, we'd love you to pop your questions in the chat line and keep engaging and putting notes of where you're calling in from and some of the interests that you have as an audience, because it's so helpful for the team at the Centre to be able to see who's joining and the interest areas. So Kate, over to you. Look forward to hearing from you this evening.
Thank you so much, Taryn. And what a great panel. It's not every day that you get to sit with these amazing people, these amazing educators, these amazing women, and it's such an honour. So thank you. Now, friends, I do have a little bit of a PowerPoint that I'd love to sort of just use as a bit of a prompt for us. It just helps me focus in on what's going on, if that's okay with you. So let me just share that and we will get started. And of course, this is when the tech doesn't like us, isn't it? We've got to love technology in these days, don't we? Who's sick of death by PowerPoint? Is anyone else sick of that? Yeah, I think we all are. I think it's a big risk, isn't it? And certainly in this incredible Zoom time, I think we're seeing a lot of Zoom fatigue. So friends, hopefully you can see my PowerPoint, and I hope that you can see this beautiful picture of a boat. In my past life, I was a sailor. In fact, I've spent a lot of time sailing, although in Canberra, that's a little bit hard. I don't think our lake quite does it justice. Lake Burley Griffin is a lovely lake, but not so great for sailing. So I want to start, as Taryn did, by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the lands of which we are all standing. I'm standing on Ngunnawal lands, and I do want to acknowledge that. But I also want to acknowledge this enormous storm that we've all been swimming through. We've all been sailing through. We've all been in the storm. We've experienced it differently because we're in different boats. And I think it's really important to recognise that as we think through this idea of building friends and connections in a post-pandemic age, we have to recognise the different experiences of the COVID storm that we've had. Some of us have watched the storm on the outside. I certainly recognise in Canberra we've been really well, I guess, insulated in many ways. I'm not to diminish our experience, but I recognise that we've had it a lot easier than our colleagues in Melbourne or in Sydney. Whereas, and particularly when we talk about children and technology, each of the states that we represent have had such a different experience in this time. We've all had a different experience of the storm because of the boats we're in. And those boats are socioeconomic, those boats are experiential, those boats are to do with the technologies that we have access to and are able to use. And I think we need to start this conversation recognising that we've had different experiences. And certainly if we look through the past year, and it's a little over a year, children have had incredibly different experiences, making connections, making friends in this time, depending on which type of boat they're in this storm. And I think we have to first and foremost acknowledge that. Some children are coming through this with increased resilience. Some children are coming through this with increased technical skills. My just 4-year-old is happy to jump on a Zoom. She knows what Zoom is because she's built new skills. She recently wanted to connect with a friend and she said, "Oh, Mum, let's Zoom them or FaceTime them. I don't want to just talk to them." She's got a new language to connect and new ways of connecting. Other friends, I acknowledge that they haven't had those experiences. A family of 4 literally next door has had 4 children, 1 iPhone, 1 laptop. They've had a very different experience. Their connections during COVID have been quite different. Unfortunately, they've been in lockdown several times, quarantined several times, and those connections are really hard. In fact, they've had to privilege their older children and their Zoom times with their class meetings, etc. So I acknowledge that we're having very different experiences. When we start to think about early childhood educators, I have to refer to the work that we've done at ECA. So if you're not familiar with this work, Early Childhood Australia is a peak body for early childhood educators. We work with children 0 to 8 and particularly focusing on educators. Our position statement on young children and digital technologies, and huge thanks to Susie Edwards and Leon Straker if you're here, is a remarkable document, and it really does highlight some of the things we need to consider here. And the first and foremost piece here is to do with relationships and citizenship. And when we look at relationships and citizenship in this particular time, it's been challenging for many families, especially those educators who are trying to connect with children who are in their service and children who are at home. That's given us questions around citizenship. Where are we focusing? How are we connecting? We also recognise that health and wellbeing has been particularly challenging in this time. It won't surprise you to note that our statistics on children's media use and screen time in this pandemic have been quite significantly changed. If we look at the work of Rideout and Rob, they work for Common Sense Media, an American organisation, but they've been tracking children's media use for a very long time. They suggested that in 2011, the average media use time per day was about 2 hours and 16 minutes. 2020, it increased to 2 hours and 24 minutes. So not a significant increase, But MacArthur and colleagues in 2021 are suggesting that that has more than doubled. So when we talk about health and wellbeing, sedentary behaviour, that's a significant increase in screen time and a significant reduction in children's connections with peers, connections socially and interactions. When we look at the ECA statement, the last piece we focus in on is play and pedagogy, which is where we start to think intentionally about how we use the affordances of technology to build relationships, to build connections, and to build learning and play opportunities. Friends, I'm really conscious that at this time in particular, that we recognise that there have been significant issues for educators. Those issues for educators have been around access to technology. Do they have technology in their classroom? Is it that they've just got an iPad and they realise that when 3 iPads are on in a centre that their Wi-Fi becomes overloaded? Because we certainly know that's the story of some educators. We also know that educators' use of resources, both personal resources, knowledge, skills and understandings, as well as resources in their services are very different, and that there is an incredible variability between experiences and opportunities for educators. And lastly, we know that there are educator and parental concerns with being in this digital age and how we manage that. You know, some families said, I do not want my child in a Zoom meeting. Others said, yes, they do want their child in a Zoom meeting. It's been a really interesting variation. And I see in the chat that a few teachers are talking about their Zoom meetings with their service, their Zoom meetings within their service. And I have to say some educators have jumped into this digital boat and done an amazing job. Others have been hampered by experience, by time, or by that huge juggle of children in service and children outside of service. I'm hoping in this, quick introduction, I've opened up some of the challenges that we're seeing and some of the huge variability by services who have and services who don't have, by educators who have been enabled, and I say enabled because they've been given time to practice, time for professional learning, and time to really delve into this digital space. And then educators who haven't had that opportunity. It's been an interesting space. And as we move forward, I think we're seeing incredible opportunities and incredible risks. And I'm hoping, as we talk to our panellists, that those opportunities and risks we can unpack a bit further. So I'm going to hand over to Megan, who's joining us from Perth.
Thank you so much, Kate. I am just going to pop up my screen. Here we go. So thank you so much for that insight. I am going to talk a little bit about how we as Scitech are embracing technology in sort of a different way than people are necessarily used to. So for a bit of background information, I do see that there's a few people from Perth online today, but for those who aren't as aware, Scitech is a science centre based in Perth, and we see about 250,000 people each year through both general admission and school excursions. Our visitors are mainly family groups with the average child age between 6.5 to 7 years old. We also have teams that go out on the road around WA to deliver programs to regional and remote areas. Our vision is to be a world leader in providing innovative and creative STEM programs, science, technology, engineering and maths, that inspire, engage and develop citizens for WA's social wellbeing, economic prosperity and sustainability. At Scitech, we create all of our content in-house, from the physical exhibits to science shows and hands-on workshops. How we engage with technology plays a really, really important role in this content creation. Through customer research, we have found that our audience is interested in how STEM skills and technology can be used to help us solve problems in the world around us. We also know that the 3 main drivers for visitors to Scitech are for fun and entertainment, for an educational experience, and for family time. So we build our whole visitor experience with all of these things in mind. We aim to provide a safe and fun learning environment that is available to absolutely everyone. We try to reduce any barriers to engagement. There's no expectation that you have to have a high level of science and tech understanding for a visit to Scitech. And as children become increasingly tech literate, we need to ensure that everything we do is contemporary while still maintaining the development of a child's 21st century skills. which are absolutely vital for STEM literacy and engagement, including critical thinking, collaboration, and communication skills. We try to create an environment of collaboration and community at our Physical Science Centre. From the moment our visitors walk in, our hope is that they feel safe and comfortable enough to engage with the exhibits, with our staff, and with each other. We promote this behaviour using collaborative multi-user exhibits, some of which cannot be completed or solved without collaborating with each other. We also have exhibits that have flow-on effects, so what one user does then affects how the other user interacts with the exhibit. Through observation, we often find that this collaboration and connection initially happens within the family groups. However, as they become more comfortable, children will begin working together to find a solution. We also try to incorporate the use of tech in these collaborative exhibits. We know that children are increasingly using technology every day, whether it's at home or in the classroom. What we try to do at Scitech is focus more on the applications of the technology and how it can be used outside of the commonly perceived interaction, such as one-on-one device use. We also try to showcase how commonly available tech can be used as a tool to assist in the scientific method and solve problems we face in our everyday lives. We are aware that the use of tech will be vital for the future workforce, and therefore it is critical that we develop these skills in all children. It isn't just about understanding the medium, but how technology is applied to everything we do and how it can be harnessed to create positive learning experiences. The World Economic Forum includes the development of digital skills, including programming, digital responsibility, and the use of technology, as well as problem-based and collaborative learning as some of the critical characteristics that define high-quality learning. I'm going to just run through a couple of examples of how we incorporate collaboration and technology into some of our exhibits. Most recently, in our latest exhibition, Earth Matters, Rethink the Future. This exhibition breaks down barriers to STEM participation by presenting really complex information in a fun, solution-focused, interactive way, and it brings to life those intangible concepts by harnessing capabilities of digital and technological solutions. So through customer research, a set of design principles emerged that informed the design of the exhibition: interactivity, hands-on physicality, family fun, and learning. This is where Scitech is pivotal in WA community, a place where visitors can engage with technology in a safe, hands-on, informal learning environment, and a place where children are encouraged to make connections with those around them through the collaborative nature of our exhibits. So one example of this is the microgrid that you can see the photos of there. So through the use of LCD screens overlaid with 3D printed buildings, the exhibit enables visitors to see the impact of their actions on their quadrant, which becomes brighter and more animated as they generate more energy. Players also have their own touchscreen dashboard where they can see the live data on how much energy everyone playing the game is generating. They can then share excess energy with others, the final goal only being reached by players collaborating with one another. The exhibit combines the physical activity of generating power through pedaling while also incorporating the use of technology to share their power so the entire town is lit up. In order to reach the end goal, all players need to collaborate and communicate, which are some key 21st century learning skills. Our observational research demonstrates that the exhibit is achieving this objective, with one young child even directing his family member when to stop and start pedaling to make sure that they got to that end goal. Another one of these exhibits is our coral reef. So to illustrate the power of making different choices in our everyday lives, visitors are able to see the impact of actions on this delicate natural ecosystem. Using MadMapper, which is a projection mapping software, we were able to project graphics onto a large 3D printed coral reef. 2 touchscreens with user-friendly interfaces enable visitors to answer a series of questions. Each answer impacts the health of the reef in front of them, with visible changes shown as a result of their actions. The different sides of the reef operate independent of each other, generating conversation between the users on what actions led to which outcomes. The exhibit provides an opportunity for visitors to develop their critical thinking and communication skills while using a piece of technology they're already comfortable with. And finally, we have the Banksia Woodlands, which is a projection room which transforms over 6 Noongar seasons. The message of the exhibit, Tread Lightly, is intertwined with both the experience and the tech that we use. Visitors need to walk carefully around creatures such as moaning frogs who bury themselves if you get too close, and bearded dragons who scurry away. To do this, we use projections and Augmenta, a sensorless tracking technology which tracks where visitors are in a space so their movements impact actions. This is technology that a lot of people would not have necessarily been exposed to before or haven't interacted with in this way. Engaging with the exhibit instantly creates connections for those in the room, as what one person does will affect the others' interactions with the whole exhibit. Our observational user research highlights how the experience sparks conversation and knowledge sharing between generations as they experience the changes happening within their ecosystem. So these are just a couple of examples of how we are trying to harness evolving technologies, some which children are already comfortable with and others that they may yet have been exposed to, and create a learning experience which develops connections, collaboration, and critical thinking without the tech necessarily being the focal point. We try to demonstrate that technology can be employed in ways outside of the commonly perceived uses to investigate and problem solve some real world problems. All right, I am now going to pass over to Sam. What's that shot?
Thank you, Megan. What an amazing place Scitech looks like. When I'm allowed to come back to Perth, I look forward to visiting. Hello, everybody. As Taryn mentioned, my name is Samantha Yorke. I am really honoured to be here with this incredible panel tonight and to speak a little bit about the, I guess, focusing in on the safely connecting with others element of the title of our event tonight. As mentioned, I work at Google here in Australia. And, you know, we think about child safety and online safety more broadly, starting from a perspective that technology, you know, really can be a force for good. And we've just seen some incredible examples of how technology is being used in incredibly innovative ways at Scitech in Perth. But, you know, really, we're seeing technology being used as potentially unlocking creativity in young children, fostering expression and learning skills that can really help children and young people build their futures and their experiences and their skill bases. But at the same time, of course, you know, it is very important to recognize that technology can be used to cause harm to children. From an industry perspective, we strive to protect children while at the same time enabling them to play and express themselves and learn while they're online and interacting with digital environments. Examples of the way that technology companies achieve these goals are really, you know, in 4 areas. The first being through building innovative products, much like the ones that Megan's just been talking about. So, you know, products that can be used by children and their families to provide them with more contained, age-appropriate experiences and protections, and to help families strike a balance in terms of technology use and consumption that works for them. The second area where I think the tech industry can really apply themselves to this problem is by implementing clear policies that dictate how products can and can't be used, policies that are flexible enough so that they can be responsive to new and emerging trends, and also developing tools that can help detect abusive content at scale and ensure that children are not exposed to harmful content in the first place, rather than being a reactive response once that exposure has taken place. The third area is around protecting children's privacy and recognizing that children have a right to privacy, as we all do. It's important to create strong privacy standards for all users of technology, but children really require quite a specialized, tailored approach given their vulnerability and also their inability to give informed consent around how data might be collected about them. And then lastly, through working with experts, and technology companies are becoming quite well versed in working with children and families, often through academic institutions and sort of very applied focus group environments. Educators are a really great source of information and feedback about how technology is being used in the classroom. And all of these experts are really designed to help inform technology companies how to create an environment where education can really help children build digital literacy and digital citizenship skills, that's a mouthful, that assists them in navigating their lives online in a safer way. And, you know, this all might sound quite straightforward to many of you, but it can be challenging to implement a lot of these principles in practice and to get them right, and to strike the right balance between enabling freedom of expression and freedom of play, but also protecting children from harm. So I thought it might be helpful to just explain a little bit how we at Google have tried to live up to these standards in some recent announcements that we have made about how people under 18 can use Google's many products more safely. And bear with me while I just have one slide to show you as a visual aid. Let me just bring this up. I hope you can all see that now. So really this slide is just explaining a range of product policy changes that we announced a few months ago. For our search engine that many of you may be familiar with, we've implemented a new policy whereby people under 18 can request to have images of them removed from Google's image search results. And for users who are under 18, we will be turning Safe Search on by default. And for those of you who don't know what Safe Search is a setting within the search engine whereby when you turn it on, it essentially filters all of your search results and removes any results that contain content that we think is more appropriate for adults to consume. So an obvious example would be pornographic content, legal pornographic content, but also content that talks about alcohol consumption or that might contain images that could be graphic or violent. So that will be turned on by default for any person who is using a Google product or Google search where we know that they're under 18. We will be disabling location history, which is essentially the tool within Google Maps that identifies where you are at any given time. So for all users under 18, that setting will be disabled. So there'll be no information collected by Google about individual people's locations when they're aged under 18. For our ads business, we will not be targeting ads based on people's age, gender, or interest, where we know they are under 18. That will be totally disabled. And we also restrict the types of ads that can be shown to people under 18. So for instance, we don't allow products for beauty products to be advertised to people under 18. On YouTube, we're changing some of the default settings here so that they are set to the most private setting for people under 18. We're introducing features around well-being, which will be sort of gentle reminders if somebody has been consuming videos on YouTube for a certain amount of time. We're also publishing special policies and quality guidelines for content that is created with children in mind for YouTube. Some of you may be familiar with the Google Assistant, which is the technology that powers the smart home devices and speakers, the ones that you talk to and that they give you a response back. We'll have Safe Search turned on by default for those products as well across the board. And we'll also be introducing wellbeing features on the Google Assistant devices so that they are ready and able to give feedback and advice about how to just strike the right balance between your consumption of digital content and your engagements in the real world. In the education context, again, we'll be using Safe Search and having that enabled by default. And we're removing the ability for children who are using Google products in the classroom to somehow hide their identity or to switch to guest mode, just to make sure again that that their actions are known to the school and that they're accountable for any actions they take while they're using school technology. And then finally, for the Play Store, which is the equivalent of Apple's App Store for Google, we've included a special section in there which is really designed to promote apps that are appropriate for children and young people to consume, and that gives parents advice about apps and what to expect in a certain app, what kind of data might be collected through an app, and what kind of content is going to be available from in there. So I'll just stop sharing my screen and come back to you all now. I think the last thing I just wanted to say is that, you know, this is an issue that many in the tech industry, Google included, take very seriously. We've had, you know, a number of years to experiment with different features and settings and to learn a lot from how people are using our products, and to also talk to a lot of parents about how their children are using products. So we're very, very open and encouraging of feedback, and I might leave it there and we can move into questions. Taryn, I think I'm handing back to you now.
Yes, thank you so much, Sam, and to Kate and Megan. A few different perspectives there, and a great engaged audience. Please keep your questions coming in the chat. We have a few there now, but I'm going to keep with Sam, and particularly, as I referenced up front, talk to the online privacy code and to extend, I guess, on what Sam's been talking about related to Google policy. I'm curious, and I'm sure also others that might be following this particular area at the moment, of the considerations that Google has and that big tech have, particularly around data use and protecting children. And you've touched on that, but there's an increased responsibility required of parents and carers, I think, particularly when we're looking at what's proposed and being discussed. Would really love to hear from you, Sam, about I guess advice and tips and recognition of the role and responsibility of parents and carers in keeping children safe and their privacy, and being proactive in children's digital identities.
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Taryn, and it really does highlight that keeping children safe online is really a shared responsibility amongst all of us, right? Industry has a very key role to play, parents have a role to play, governments have a role to play in putting the right regulatory frameworks in place. And for those of you who aren't aware, the government announced earlier this week that it would be instructing the Privacy Commissioner to work with the online industry to develop a code of conduct. It will apply to all social media organizations, so think Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snap. It will also apply to data brokerage firms, who are organizations who develop databases about individual attributes and interests, and then they offer those interests to advertisers to be able to target advertisements to each of us. You may not have heard of many of these organizations, but Woolworths, for instance, owns one of those. And this code will also apply to any digital platform that has more than 2.5 million Australian customers. So that will bring in companies like Spotify and Amazon. It's expected that this code will impact about 150 different organizations that are operating here in Australia. And one of the key areas of focus of the code, as Taryn has highlighted, is how children's data can be better protected. And this is recognizing really the point that I made a little earlier, which is that children are clearly more vulnerable than adults and may not be able to provide informed consent around how their data is being collected and used when they're engaging online. So first off, I think that the development of this code is a real opportunity for the online industry to demonstrate that they take privacy issues seriously. And some organizations, I'm expecting, will be a bit more advanced in how they think about this than others. But the process of working on this code together, I think, will be a great level setter across the industry and will hopefully set a benchmark that all companies will need to comply with. At Google, we've been investing in tools that allow our customers to control how their data is being used and to easily be able to find information about why Google collects certain information through our products. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we have put policies in place, for instance, that prohibit targeting ads to people under 18 and not allowing certain types of ad categories to be advertised at all to children and young people, whether they're targeted or not. I think that's an industry-leading policy. I don't know whether I don't think other companies have implemented that kind of policy, but I think that might be something that this code looks at quite closely. One of the challenges, I think, for a company like mine is that it's been an important principle for Google's founders over the years that people be able to use Google's products without needing to have a Google account and without needing to have given Google your personal information. So you can do a search, for instance, without signing into a Google account. You can watch a video on YouTube. You can browse the web on the Chrome browser. But one of the obligations that's been anticipated by this code is that all individuals' ages will need to be verified when they're creating an account. So this would mean that you wouldn't be able to watch a video on YouTube, for instance, without being signed into a Google account and having already provided personal information to Google, which seems a little strange to me in the sense that forcing somebody to give Google your personal information to watch a video on YouTube seems a bit more privacy invasive than privacy protective. But I think there's going to be a lot of issues to work through with the development of this code, Taryn. I don't think it's going to be easy to get 150 companies on the same page on a lot of these issues, but I do think it is a tremendous opportunity for the industry to demonstrate that they do take these issues very seriously.
Oh, thanks so much, Samantha. I think it is going to be a very interesting time, and like you say, there's different maturity of many organisations in being further along in addressing some of these things already, and a lot of implications for the code that haven't necessarily been explicitly outlined as you've been able to give the audience a bit of a sense of what's ahead. So I really appreciate that. And there is a question in the chat about how you do identify somebody that is 18 and does a parent do that? And so we might get you to address that if you could, Samantha.
Yeah, and look, today, first of all, you can only sign up for a Google account when you reach the age of 13. When you're under 13 and you want to use some Google services, we have a product called Family Link, which is essentially asking a parent to create an account for their child, and the parent is given certain rights to supervise how their child is using their Google account. So for instance, they can dictate which apps can be downloaded from the Play Store. They can also determine which websites the child can visit. So for under 13s, we have a sort of a parental supervisory product model, but for over 13s, we do rely on people to be honest with us when they declare their age, when they sign up for an account, and that is how we then determine whether somebody is under 18 or not. I think there are efforts afoot to use technology a bit better to help us, I guess, to give us some clues when somebody may have lied about their age and where they may be purporting to be an adult when actually they're under 18. And there are some interesting technologies that are becoming available to help companies make that decision. Those technologies, though, again, in the context of privacy, are a little bit privacy invasive, though, because they look at things like, what websites the person might be visiting online and what kind of videos they're watching on YouTube, to give it an idea of how old the person might be, which, some people would be, I think, quite reasonably concerned about companies looking into some of these other ways in which you might be using their products and consuming content, just to get a better understanding of how old they are. So I think this just highlights how complex these issues are, and how, keeping people safe on the one hand may require us to actually adopt more privacy invasive practices in order to make a better decision about how old somebody is and how much more protection they might need. So it's not an easy problem to solve by any stretch of the imagination.
Can I jump in there, Sam? I think the extra challenge here is communicating that. You are highly tech literate. You understand the tech, you know what's going on, and there is so many machinations in here. When we're talking with people who work in education and care services, or perhaps with families, not all of us know this. I've been researching in this space for 15 years, and there are still things that I didn't know about. That there's a whole heap of new features that are emerging very quickly. And I think the challenge for us, and perhaps the challenge for us as a centre, is how do we communicate those changes in a way that doesn't scare people away from using tech, but gives them informed decisions and helps them to make really healthy tech choices as we move forward. And all three of our organisations have chosen to partner in this centre for that reason. But I do think that there's a significant piece here about, great to see changes, how do we get parents and educators to understand those? Taryn, I think your video is dropping out because of unstable internet, but do you still want to ask questions of us?
No, and I think they're excellent comments, Kate, for the role of educators. And I think also similarly, it's challenging to think about the different levels of tech literacy of parents when we're thinking about the code. And I think you've done a great job, Sam, of bringing forward some of the things we should be thinking about on that particular topic. And I do apologise for having my camera off, but hopefully you can still hear me okay. I do want to go to you, Kate, because I would like to, I enjoyed the boat, and particularly, I guess, your framing that we are all in very different situations and we'll be observing really different contexts, and particularly in early childhood education and with your educators. I'm curious to hear from you about innovation that you've seen, and where I guess when we are often forced to have to get innovative quickly, has there been I guess case studies that you can draw the audience's attention to?
Absolutely. As a researcher in this space, I recognise that so often there's a publication lag, isn't there? But we are seeing some emerging studies coming out of beautiful innovation. In fact, you had one, you had a case study of that indicated here, where Heather said that in the chat that she's been doing interviews and meeting with families via Zoom all day in her context as she transitions children in. We are absolutely seeing pockets of innovation. We're seeing services change the way they're doing transition to school. One of my favourites there was a regional service in Victoria, where all of the local school principals and kindergarten teachers have been doing virtual tours with families to help children make that transition into the school context, even though they can't physically go and visit the school context. We're seeing families having connections, birthday parties over Zoom. We're seeing families welcome new families into their context that they normally wouldn't have been able to meet just by the very fact that we're having Zoom meetings for families. We're seeing increased connections. One of the things I loved this year was during children's simultaneous story time, we literally took children into outer space. And all of a sudden, because of COVID, We took families into outer space. And I don't know if many of you remember that this year's the simultaneous story time was actually read by an astronaut in the space station. What excites me about that, these little pockets of innovation, are that we're opening our practice in education and care services up so that people can participate in those in different ways. We're opening up our services so that families can see what we do in our practice, and we're giving windows into what high quality education and care can look like. We're also seeing services who are making really conscious decisions, and they might be conscious decisions to limit screen time, to go into a bush kinder situation, to use the outdoors more, where services are saying, actually, let's make really intentional decisions around our tech use. You know, Megan's doing really intentional work at Scitech to enable collaboration. And oh my goodness, I want to move to Perth now, Megan. So if you can make some room on the couch, I'll be over as soon as the borders are open. You know, you're deliberately positioning tech to enable collaboration. And I think we're starting to identify those pockets of innovation. And I can't wait to see the work of the Digital Child Centre to see where we can amplify those pockets of innovation. And I do see that we're starting to see that, and I can't wait to see more.
Thank you so much, Kate. And it is right that there is so much innovation out there, and equally, I guess there is the lapse and lag in many people's lives of having to quickly pick up their education and learning as you know, further development for educators. And so my hats go off to the education sector, because it has been a time where it really is challenging. And I mean, we've heard stories amongst our young people that I work with at AIME of, you know, teachers that have just had really hard times, and it is an incredible time to feel hope and to feel that there will be innovation that has been achieved, and we will see amazing stories come out of post-pandemic. When we can call it that, I guess, is also another factor. But we do have a question in the chat, particularly of any published research, and so I would ask Kate and Megan and Sam to possibly pop in the chat anything that you can consider or could share, and we will also ensure that the centre does follow up to provide and post anything that is relevant to the session this evening. But another question that I did see particularly for you, Kate, was about the digital divide. And many of us, I guess, are passionate about the fact that technology is still a privilege for many, and it's also where I think you described households that only have one tech device, and then many people without technology access and internet access and data issues across the globe. And so how do you, I guess, in the sector see and I guess approach and think about the digital divide, and where are you seeing opportunities or ways in which we can address this as an issue?
Yeah, it is an absolutely huge issue. Unfortunately, it's larger in some of our regional and remote communities. And we have to acknowledge that internet access is not equal. You know, if we think about the broadband enabled networking services that we are relying on even here, the further out you go, the more likely there are to be complications, and that is amplified when we talk about young children and their digital use or their access to digital devices and resources. I think the biggest thing for me is that we encourage educators to be flexible. If a family doesn't have a device where they can join in a Zoom, perhaps you could connect with them by sending photos or using a digital documentation platform, or even sending good old letters to remain connected. That one size does not fit all when we're talking about building relationships, building friendships, and giving children their rights in this space. So as educators, we need to be increasingly flexible. As researchers, we need to be increasingly flexible. It's no longer appropriate to rely on families to come into our labs we now need to give options. And I think Megan was mentioning that they've got some outreach programs that are helping to address that as well. So I do want to plug over to you, Megan, to hear more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Yeah, I do really think it's important here. This is where industry and higher education as well, universities and organisations such as Scitec play a really, really important role in ensuring that no one gets left behind. It is a mammoth task, obviously, particularly in WA. We are a huge state, and it is it's quite a mission to get across the whole state, but we do it. Our goal is to see every school in WA every 3 years. Obviously, that's not, we would love to do more, but it is a very complex situation. And it is something we're very aware of, is that divide, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger unless there's intervention and unless industry and government jump on board to ensure that these resources are starting to get available for everyone. There are also some elements of tech learning, whether it's coding, machine learning, that actually can be done without tech. There's some physical things that you can do. Coding, for example, you providing instructions, pretending you're a robot, moving forward, understanding that how detail you need to go into when you're coding an actual robot, but you're telling a human what to do. There are some things that are available. Obviously, it's not quite at the same level, but at least there's some stepping stones that people can look into.
And great to build those collaborations with children in real life as well. You know, there's such beautiful partnerships there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think just building on that, Megan, you talked about such the role of Scitec, and particularly in social development, and as the topic is particularly looking at post-COVID times, and whilst Perth has not certainly seen the impact of cities like Melbourne here in Australia and other spaces across the globe, have you seen anything emerging, I guess, of the difference of children now coming back into group settings, and is there any research being done, I guess, on social development and where children do have now learning delays or social delays, having, you know, been limited over the last few years in these interactions? Is there anything that Scitec is doing to have a look at that, or have you observed that in the centre?
Yeah, so like you said, we're very, very lucky over here in WA. We've had very limited lockdowns, and our science centre has only been was closed for a few months last year. What we did find, though, as soon as we reopened, that there was no hesitation for families to come back in with their young children. It was the first thing that they wanted to do, which was really great to see, and just sort of cemented what we know already, that Scitec is a fun, family, safe place to be and to learn and to make those connections, whether it is building those connections within their family group or with other children. What we do tend to see, there's no research on it, but just observations. I'm on the Scitec floor every day having a look, and it's really handy having exhibits that break the ice between children. So whether it's using the physical exhibits or the tech aspect of the exhibits, it's that instant meeting of two children who don't necessarily know each other, but they work together to figure something out, they help each other out, and it is really heartwarming to see. And I think that that's something, no matter where we go, it's just the nature of children, and it's how they play, and it's how they can learn in the more fun environment, I guess. It's informal learning, it's not classroom specific, and it's also not at home having to do learning through their iPad. So yeah, it's definitely something that we see and we try to promote as much as possible at Scitec.
And I think that that probably covers some of the questions that we do have in the chat about collaboration and peers learning together. It's you've wrapped it up really nicely there, Megan. I think of, you know, breaking the ice between young children and increasing their social development through play. And I think everybody would agree, or has definitely commented in the chat, that they're coming to visit you soon if they haven't seen you already. It sounds so wonderful. Wonderful.
Sorry, I do just have to point out that that exhibition that I showed you has been shipped overseas. So anyone that is planning on coming, you won't see that one, but there are plenty of other things to play with.
Well, that's very encouraging that you're also able to exhibit the amazing innovation and creation of an Australian organisation, and congratulations. I think it's wonderful to see that being shared with the world. We're almost to the end and to time, and so I'm going to thank Megan, thank Kate, and thank Sam for joining us this evening, and just throw to them, I guess, for any closing remarks before we do close this evening. And I do want to thank the audience so much. As we mentioned, Zoom fatigue is a very real thing, and joining seminars and choosing to spend your time with us, we really do appreciate all of the interaction and engagement that you've had in the chat. And certainly, I believe the Centre will be able to give the recording and also the leads and documents that have been asked for in the questions. And so I'm sure that will be published following. But thank you all. I will go to the panellists for closing remarks and then wish you all a very good evening or rest of the day if you're somewhere else in the world.
Thank you so much, Taryn. What fun. For me, as I finish up, I want to encourage you to help children to collaborate, to communicate, and to create. Those are my big three: collaborate, communicate, create. That's how we move forward in this space.
Beautiful, Kate.
Yeah, I think for me as well, it's just about not being scared of technology. Hopefully I showed some ideas of how we can have a little bit of fun with it and use it in different ways. So that's probably one of the biggest goals. It's moving at such a rapid rate, but embrace it, enjoy it.
Couldn't agree more, Megan. I think there's too much misinformation and disinformation that makes us anti-technology, and digital children of the future can absolutely be enabled to be safe online and be responsible, technology users. So over to you, Sam, for our last remarks.
Yes, it actually very much in sync with Kate and Megan, but I just wanted to pick up on how intimidating it can be to try to keep abreast of all of this change and new platforms and new technologies. And in terms of protecting the children and young people in our lives, I don't think you need to be across all of the ins and outs of how the different technologies work and the different platforms they're using. As long as there is an open line of communication between you and the children in your life, you just want to encourage them to come and talk to you if they see something or experience something that frightens them or upsets them, or that they're concerned about. And it really doesn't matter if you don't understand the technology. You just want to have that dialogue open with them, and you want them to come to you if they are upset about something they've seen online. So just make sure that communication that Kate spoke about is just super important.
No, it's so true, Sam, and I think it is communication and the responsibility of the full ecosystem around children to ensure they've got the agency that we want to see young people have, and to grow into amazing young citizens and very digital literate young people. So thank you again to our panellists and to the audience, and good evening. Thank you for having us.